If you've ever played Bloodborne, you'll notice that it's a game that uniquely elaborates on the age-old game mechanical question of, what happens when I do this? As you explore Bloodborne, discovering all that it has to offer, a number in the top right corner of the HUD with an eye next to it begins to increase. This resource is aptly called Insight, and your relationship with it becomes more apparent as you continue to progress. Did you find a new area? Your insight increases. Did you encounter a new boss? Your insight accumulates. Did you talk to a guy who looks like he has a bunch of people trapped inside his basement? You get the point. As you roam the city of Yynem and unravel its mysteries, hopefully not this dude anytime during your first 10 hours, your insight will continue to rise. And when the value of your insight reaches certain thresholds, the people and things in your environment begin to change, revealing a much more sinister truth. A good example of this relationship would be in the Cathedral Ward area. You'll probably hear it first, but then you'll see the microsupernova. How's that for an oxymoron? If you decide to look into this mystery, well, prepare to have your character inexplicably compacted into stardust. But once you've gained enough insight and you return to this area, oh dear God, man! What in seven hells? You see this eldritch abomination ready to implode you into meat juice. This is knowledge-based discovery, a mechanic seen across, well, just about every modern FromSoftware game, but also games that tend to stand out in general. Think Zelda Majora's Mask for a classic example, but the more recent entries exploring this dynamic would be Fear and Hunger or Outer Wilds. When refined, knowledge-based discovery means that there are unknown unknowns. Look at oranges, for example. A freshly picked orange is both green and orange. And everyone knows that oranges have loads of vitamin C. But did you know that 8 strawberries contain more vitamin C than 1 orange? That is to say, you may know what you know. Most people know that an orange isn't just the color orange, but you don't know what you don't know. If repeating fruit trivia that's lived in my head for decades seemed out of left field to some of you, that's good. It's supposed to. But maybe, just maybe, some of you paid close attention to what I just said there and chuckled, like we're in on some sort of inside joke. After all, an amygdala isn't just the part of your brain largely credited for responsiveness to fear. It's also the name given to our friend here. Regardless of how you learned the meaning of that word, whether that was through playing the game, searching the internet, or hearing about it for the first time from some random dude, the journey to this discovery was layered. Bloodborne is one of the best games to demonstrate this phenomenon, where the meaning of a name, a person, a place, or an event can change depending on the context. And Void Stranger appeals to me for the same reason. Void Stranger was made by System Erasure, 2 Finnish dudes, Ibrosgi and Ebo, who, not unlike most modern love stories, became acquainted in an online forum with the mutual desire of wanting to try their hand at making a game. That baby took almost a decade to gestate with the advent of the team's first game, Zero Ranger, on September 28, 2018. This game's been described as the Undertale of shmups for its fearless decision to not let its genre define its presentation. Interestingly enough, development for the game shifted into 4th gear just a year after the release of a certain game. During its development, the roles were split about as evenly as you could imagine. The game was developed in GameMaker while its pixel art was made in Microsoft Paint. Ibrosgi specialized in programming and was largely responsible for making the first half of Zero Ranger, but he also composed all of the game's music, and holy heck does it slap. You're listening to it right now. It takes a certain level of restraint to not just hang out in the menu for extended periods of time to actually play System Erasure's first game. It also takes a certain level of restraint to not tell you why that is. Seriously, I had to edit that whole section out. Ebo made Zero Ranger's pixel art and is largely responsible for its playable second half, which says a lot, seeing as how he didn't know how to program going into this passion project. He's also credited for constructing the majority of the game's canon. Zero Ranger's lore is as cool as it is complex. Don't ask me how I know. I'm still in the process of discovering that for myself. Ibrosgi even acknowledged Ebo as Zero Ranger's primary designer.
And I think Ebo is the main designer for Zero Ranger. He plotted out the main plot and made the canon. It just kind of fit all the design so well.
You are too kind.
Ebo disagrees, knowing full well that the two could not have ever hoped to have made a game without each other, as their respective areas of expertise gave the project its necessary collaborative gumption to succeed.
Now that I have started learning programming myself, I think that ultimately programmers are the final say on the game design.
I told you this was a modern love story. As far as I know, This is the only game I've ever played that involves Buddhism and space as a theme. Take my money, System Erasure. Considering that Zero Ranger was the dev's first game, designing its skeleton had to have involved a lot of trial and error. It was less plug and play and more like plug in the necessary parameters. Check on Ebo, who's learning how to program. Hey Ebo, you doing alright, man? Make sure the game you've been working on didn't blow up like one of its in-universe enemies, and then you could playtest. It was also a lesson in self-awareness. The duo had to learn that perfection is only self-imposed, but not because they're on record admitting as much. The green and orange colors pop as you play. The control scheme feels buttoned up and precise, like a beginner-friendly Ikaruga. This is how it used to look. There's explicit inspiration from just about any shmup you can think of, mostly Guxt. Okay, a lot of Guxt. Forget the Space Invaders reference, there's an entire character that nods to the first shmup computer, the PDP-1. Its intro cutscene was directly inspired by Daimaho. Need I say more? That was rhetorical. This boss battle with Kaiju Onion Man, you remember him, takes a page from the book of 1993's In the Hunt, where you're similarly pursued by a monster which takes its inspiration from the description of Lucifer from Dante's Inferno. But this scene is easily my favorite from the game. It wears Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind on its sleeve because... how could it not? See those cocoons in the background there? Yeah. I would even go as far to say that at least one half of System Erasure watched and enjoyed Neon Genesis Evangelion. But System Erasure doesn't just love their brain children, they want to share that love with you. Back when Zero Ranger was called Final Boss, its development process was about as indie as you can get. The latest versions would get uploaded on shmup forums, have similarly enthused strangers help with the playtesting, and then it would iterate from that feedback. Abrosky would hand his laptop to his friends to make Zero Ranger more casual friendly. Since its release, Zero Ranger has received various bouts of free DLC, which were added in good faith to enhance its base experience. And it has one more big DLC on the horizon.
See you in Black Onion, everybody.
There's a voice clip of Abrosky teasing it right there. That alone should be your deciding factor for buying Void Stranger, which recently shadow dropped its own brand new DLC as of April 2nd for the low price of free $99. But you should also buy it because everything that makes Zero Ranger special, the visuals, the slaptastic soundtrack, the gameplay, everything is only expanded upon by this spiritual successor. After your first hour of Void Stranger, you'll echo what System Erasure told its playtesters when they were asking for advice. This is a puzzle game. Several hours later, give or take 25, you'll say, "This is a puzzle game." The sentence remains the same, but your tone changed entirely. On its Steam About page, it's advertised as a Sokoban-style puzzle game where every step counts. Sokoban games typically involve puzzles that utilize boxes. A more popular recent example would be Baba Is You. That came out 5 years ago? I should, probably play that game for the first time. My personal favorite of the genre is Catherine, which do we really qualify that as a Sokoban game? You make a fair point, and I guess you're pushing box-looking cubes to try and avoid creatures with butts for faces. Yeah, you're doing the same thing in Void Stranger. I didn't specify which part of the butt. Even the most keen observers who watched Void Stranger's release trailer probably didn't notice that the puzzle rooms that were showcased, the ones you're seeing right now, when combined together, spell out the word Sokoban. That's pretty darn slick. In the tips section of that About page, you're told that the game autosaves between each room. This assurance pairs splendidly with a mechanic that I willfully ignored at the beginning of my first run. The one that allows you to correct course if you're about to fall off a ledge. Just like Zero Ranger, the design philosophy behind this was to make the game approachable for anyone. In Zero Ranger, you're allowed to run into enemies a few times before losing a life. If you die mid-stage, there are checkpoints to keep you from restarting from its beginning. So in Void Stranger, when you're about to fall off a ledge, you see a slipping animation, allowing you to make a redirection like you didn't just almost die. This also doesn't burn a turn, which is helpful in more precarious situations like ones involving enemies. These two features, the autosave feature and the slip mechanic, allow the player to enjoy the game's challenges without it feeling punishing. I'd be curious to learn how the meaning of these words will change for you over time, because Void Stranger is a puzzle game's puzzle game. I'm going to share with you how your first playthrough of Void Stranger could go. And before we get into things, I want to assure you that I don't intend to spoil too much, but I will be covering some gameplay details as well as plot beats. Ultimately, what I'm about to share will barely scratch the surface of what you can expect to see in Void Stranger. And in order to do that, I've got to talk about vibes. What I liked, what I disliked, did I dislike anything? But also, some game design as well as context. So, if you'd like to go in untarnished, now's your chance. For anyone who needs more convincing, or if you're here to find some of the carefully placed Easter eggs I've scattered throughout this video, let's get Void acquainted. You boot up the game. Because you're a 70-year-old man trapped inside a millennial's body, you have neither the time nor the patience to try and full screen the software during a cutscene. A black comet approaches and crashes somewhere on Earth, maybe Jerusalem. Advancing from a mountainous horizon is a somber-looking woman. This is Grey. If I were to fan cast Grey, I'd pick Scarlett Johansson. You know, because she can fight. Don't ask me how I know. Huh, look at that. It's your first achievement. And apparently, it's an important wedding gift. That's interesting. Looks like that's the only achievement in this game. Grey arrives at her destination, a bottomless cube-shaped pit. Gosh, that, looks pretty deep. Well, no time like the present, that's what I always say. Cue the raw intro that fills you with intrigue. And if we could just pause right here for a minute. The audio heard in this cold open is on point. It really feels like System Erasure was attempting to be medium appropriate while also challenging themselves. For context, Zero Ranger runs on an arcade strip aesthetic, replete with intertextual references, like its love letter intro to Daimaho. And the intro is musically about as perfect as a musician with 10 years can get on his first indie game. Void Stranger's opening cinematic does none of that. There's no music and no color. Well, there's some color, but it's going for an intro you'd see on a Game Boy with the pizzazz turned up to 11. The music doesn't lead the scenes, the sound does. And Dabrowski really perfected the sound effects here. From the comet that sounds like you're in its passenger seat, as it whizzes to some unknown destination on what looks like Earth, to Grey's footsteps in the sand-littered dirt. And then this. It sends chills down the spine. From a sound perspective, this intro takes such a different approach from Zero Ranger, yet still manages to allure. Add all of this with Void Stranger's one and only one in-game achievement that acts like a Dark Souls item, providing the only words you'll see for some time, with a description that gives you context about your situation. And that's some great show-don't-tell methodology. We haven't even talked about the visual aesthetic. The game runs in a 4-color, mostly monochromatic presentation. If you want things to look less Game Boy Pocket, you can Roy G. Biv the game's aesthetic within the limitations of a Game Boy Color's visuals. Visual options are nice, but seeing as this was your first handheld console, you're sticking to the Grey palette. You realize that the pit wasn't bottomless. As she makes impact with the floor, Grey loses 3 of her 10 hit points, which is indicated by the HUD that further blurs the line between Game Boy and Steam game. You now control this Void Stranger. But before you do that, let's figure out how to full screen, yeah? Well, that's interesting. There's a memories option in the pause menu. You wonder what that's all about. And that image looks curious. Okay, you know you've seen this one before. That's the image of Lucifer eating traitors from Dante's Inferno. It's some pretty metal stuff. Didn't you already talk about that? Well, whatever. I'm sure it's probably nothing. Ah, there we go. Full screen applied. You make your way to the staircase. Upon descending, you see a fancy treasure chest in front of a monolithic horned woman. She's somehow standing in this foreboding abyss, inviting you with open arms to what's in front of her. You open the chest, only to find a staff, and then, suddenly... Once you have your scepter, the game controls like Cave Noire, a Konami game that never released outside of Japan. Just another shining example that the guys over at System Erasure are cool as heck. Just like me. I spent $130 to be this cool. But really, I'm superficial enough to admit that I loved the packaging and box art enough to needlessly justify spending the money on this bad boy. Yep, you're looking at $130 worth of extremely short footage here, because I am certifiably dumb. I also love how the game's box fits into my already tiny hands. I didn't know the packaging for Game Boy games was smaller in Japan. And check out this adorable instruction manual. I love how the katakana is formatted. I can't read this! I mean, look at all those Sanrio characters looking all kawaii. And not judging me for being such a buffoon. This game inspired Void Stranger, everyone. You now walk in a turn-based fashion, limited by each tile space that you see on the ground. After experiencing this, 2 rules should become immediately clear to you. Rule number 1 is that this newly acquired void route of yours can pick up 1 tile space, leaving a void in its wake. You can now use tile spaces to make land bridges with the condition that you can only carry 1 tile at a time. The second rule that should be apparent to you is to try and get to the exit. Of course, you learned rules 3 and 4 before ever learning the second rule out of morbid curiosity. You remember rule number 3? Should you walk off a ledge, you have a brief moment to undo your misstep. Fail to do this, or fat finger a misinput, and well, you've played a 2D Zelda game before, right? After falling into the abyss, you're greeted by a suspiciously unalarming and horny bat. Not that kind of horny, that looks like it belongs in a Yuji Horii game. The little demon bat offers you what feels like a Faustian bargain by saying that you can continue on your journey if you just eat the fruit. I've read my fair share of Greek and Shinto mythology. Don't eat anything that you find in the underworld. Everyone knows that. You decide not to take your own advice, and you are brought back to the starting floor where you perished. You quite literally mind the gap and continue onward to the stairs. In the next room, you see another chest, and for some reason, you see a rock just chilling in its own corner. Inside the chest, you find a tasty locust. Those are the game's words, not mine. Your character must like eating bugs or something. So the locusts are just optional collectibles. On the 5th floor, the game teaches you a new rule. Because you can only make paths 1 block at a time, you can only make a lined pathway when there are 3 blocks in an ordered path. But if you try to go for the chest below, because these locusts have some sort of value, right? You can earn a reward that's more valuable than a collectible item. After you kick the chest here 3 times, your mind refuses to accept that you can't open chests from behind, almost like your YouTube career didn't take off from making Zelda videos or anything. You realize that you need to create a parallel path adjacent to the one you're currently on if you want that cute, crunchy, delectable, dare I say allegorical, inedible little snack. So you grab a space and then backtrack perpendicularly in order to turn yourself around and make that path, adding another locust to the collection. And look at that! The next puzzle reinforces what you've just learned. You can use it to get to that stairwell, or you can take that newfound perpendicular pathing skill of yours and reinforce it into your long-term memory by using it to get to the next chest, like solving some sort of extra credit math problem. I don't like math, but I do like dopamine. Going out of your way rewards you by increasing your proficiency in tile pathing. There's zero pressure to do so, and certainly nothing that would make you want to learn these extra skills or anything. Right? Make it to the next floor and you'll learn another fundamental ability, the boulder push. Ah, so that's why the rocks are here. They're meant to put the Bon in Sokoban. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So it looks like the rocks act as obstacles meant to test your newfound knowledge. Clever. You just kick one down here? Let's try that again. Looks like eating that fruit means there's no longer a death penalty in this game. You descend further. This room seems rather random. I mean, it's a straight shot to the exit, so what's the point? Same goes for this floor. There's a new critter trapped in the corner over there, but really, you're just recycling skills you've already learned instead of feeling challenged. Well, now you're in a room with the guys you saw earlier. You remember them, and what's more, they follow the same horizontal route they were confined to. Huh. When you push a boulder, these enemies ignore the fact that you used your turn, giving them an advantage. Now we're getting somewhere. These guys, which are called strange maggots, are the perpendicular counterpart to the vertically impaired strange leeches that you just encountered. These deceptively easy levels were actually monster tutorials. I'm an idiot. Oops, we're role-playing here. You're an idiot! Now take all of the rules you just learned, the ways to travel in limited confined spacing, with what you know about enemy patterns, and now you have to imagineer your way toward the next exit, with monsters in your face. This process will continue on and on, ensuring that you feel somewhat comfortable knowing the rules you're being taught, only to swipe the rug from under you just to keep you on your toes. You feel comfortable making land bridges over empty spaces? How do you feel about it while trying to avoid getting mauled? But it feels great getting those nice little aha moments when you solve a puzzle. You'll definitely encounter moments when you feel stuck. These moments are also great, due to its turn-based combat, or lack thereof, because let's be honest, if you run into an enemy, you will die. A hit stop animation with 999 damage attached to it happens whenever you make conflict with an enemy. Why is that? Who's to say? Anyway, you have to avoid collisions with these monsters at all costs, turning them into moving obstacles that will kill you, and adding yet another layer of complexity toward getting to an exit. In Void Stranger, just like with Cave Noire, you dungeon crawl at a turn-based pace. Both games have monsters with determined paths that you should consider committing to memory. But in Cave Noire, you can actually fight. Victory is dependent on an RNG value determined by your character's level as well as certain equipable items. Void Stranger doesn't have items. At first. You'll have to figure out how to find them. No, I'm not telling you how. What do you think I am, a narc? Grab a notebook like this guy did, or find a friend and talk it out. Preferably, do both those things. What's that? You have no friends? I'd like to take this as an opportunity to tangent about the System Erasure Discord server for a moment. What makes a great game stand above its peers is its ability to foster a supportive environment. One of the best parts about gaming for me is being able to share discoveries with people. Look at what FromSoftware did with its ghostly messages replete with an upvote system for complete strangers to help each other. Even if one of those messages did kill me, I still got a laugh out of the ordeal. While it didn't have any online connectivity, Undertale had its own share of whispers among its fans.
Dude, there's like a 1 in 100 chance that this strange creature you'll probably never see again will show up on your run.
Enjoying a game with others, sometimes people you barely know, and having collective epiphanies alongside them isn't just a symptom of a well-made game. It's a testament of something much greater: community. And this server is great at offering just that. I've met some cool people here. Its community has been more than welcoming as well as helpful, especially if you don't have a friend to play this game organically alongside you. As you can see from this screenshot, there's even a nice hierarchy of channels discussing the game that's directly proportional to the amount of spoilers you're aware of. Each channel has its own warning to keep people from accidentally spoiling themselves and each other. That dedication to ensuring that everyone has a candid experience is neat to see, and for the more lore-obsessed like myself, it feels like the community is always sharing some new revelation, if not something lighthearted. Here's an out-of-context meme posted by one of the game's developers. When I say that I love this, nostalgia's taking the wheel, sure, for reasons that I probably formatted into some light reading in this section. But really, it's awesome to see a developer being actively involved in their game's server. Here's another excerpt from the interview I showed previously. Just to catch you up to speed, the interviewer is saying that he saw some of the planning documents for Zero Ranger involving our old friend, Kaiju Onion Man, as the planning documents are being displayed on the screen for viewers to see while watching the interview. Does that image look familiar to you?
Did you see the placeholder face?
Yes.
Good.
These two vignettes support the overall impression that Ebrosgi and Ebo have left on me. They're a couple of dudes who don't take themselves too seriously. They've put their heart and soul into the two games they've made and the community it's fostered. In your quiet solitude, as you start to contemplate whether connection with a human is possible in this void, what the? You take a second glance at your screen to make sure that person you're seeing isn't imaginary. There will be extraneous narrative moments in Void Stranger's A-plot, but just like a FromSoftware game, they have to be earned. You'll find various NPCs throughout the game, but you can't exactly just go and talk to some of them. You'll have to earn that conversation. What's more is that these NPCs have success and failure conditions depending on how you act. So, as a certain adage goes, take your time. My favorite winnable conversation is the nun. If you can manage to chat with her, it's revealed that she's not the most devout of servants, even going so far as to question the belief in a higher power. She mentions Sister Ballbuster, great name by the way, breathing down her neck, who you can probably imagine as looking like a bird and having the moral flexibility of tungsten. It becomes clear to you that this nun has a penchant for getting into trouble and is probably only a woman of the cloth due to circumstance. Regardless, the conversation she provides is thought-provoking. Did a lack of faith contribute to her arrival in the Void? A place she admits to not arriving at voluntarily? And yet, despite not being a model acolyte, she says the most honest criticism of any religious following. Belief alone will not save you. You can't just lip service your way to paradise. All this talk about a higher power almost feels like it's trying to warn you about something. No, that couldn't be it. The reward for completing this questline was everything I could have hoped for and so much more. The nun is getting caught chain-smoking darts by Sister Ballbuster. I can't. As you're struggling with various puzzles in isolation, being able to interact with some semblance of someone that isn't a monster trying to eat you, looking at you, hyper-realistic Pac-Man. A friend from my community comments helped make that joke. Dude's rocking a profile picture of Zenitsu, another famous catcher of lightning. Can't say I'm surprised. Well, it just feels relaxing. The journey through this void can feel taxing on your spirit, and being able to have brief interactions with someone, anyone, can feel like a breath of fresh air. Especially when you finally see something like Big Chungus Among Us. Take a look at that enemy portrait. Now just add a little color? See what I mean? This beast imitates your every move instead of engaging with you. When you're finally able to communicate with them, you're only greeted with a reflection of yourself. It makes the kinship you had with others who found themselves in this void almost feel like a hoax. You eventually make your way to a landing steeped in mystery. The music slowly fades. ushering in what I can only describe as a high-pressured yet muffled humming. It's about as settling as it is unsettling, like something bigger awaits you, somewhere close yet far. Wisps of light melodically enter and then exit, almost inviting you to stick around in an area that's just so different from what you've seen up until this point. You walk up to the birch tree and decide to rest. And then the game closes. Well, I guess this is Void Stranger's way of suggesting that you go and touch grass. That's nice. Whoa. You're no longer in the dungeon bound by its restricted movements. Being able to walk freely is the game's way of saying that you're in a flashback. The gameplay is informing the story here, and it's doing it in Nibelheimic proportions. So much so that you'd think we're in a JRPG. We're in a JRPG. Like, what? Not even 2 minutes ago, you were doing turn-based puzzles. Now, you're turn-based fighting the notoriously smelly demon princess. Take a look at those body odor fumes seeping out of her bed sheets. She looks like the first form of Scarmillion, the archfiend from Final Fantasy IV, which was inspired by Dante's Inferno, that's right, in an optically Suikoden battle. This memory that's made the game switch genres unapologetically is just one example of what waits for you at each birch tree. As you rest, the game shuts off, encouraging you to come back at a later time. Maybe take that advice, maybe don't. And when you boot back up, a flashback, yes, but also, sometimes, a completely different game. And it's here where it's easy to make parallels to Undertale, a game that took influence from other games like Earthbound, that could switch genres on a dime, and usurp the conventions ruling over your mind. Earlier I said that Zero Ranger has been described as the Undertale of shmups. Would you believe me if I told you that Undertale took its own inspiration from shmups? What with the bullet heck battle system, where success is determined by moving a cursor around, avoiding collisions in order to advance battles? Let's bring it full circle. There's a secret boss that you can find at Zero Ranger that looks nothing short of the Sans fight. I don't think I'm making any huge leaps here. Games can and should influence other games. That's artistic collaboration. How many games have you played in the last 10 years that have a mechanic involving a game closing itself? Because I'm counting like 2 right now. The rest stops in Void Stranger act as lights at the end of your proverbial tunnel, offering you an opportunity to close the game and talk to a friend about what you just experienced. You know, if you have any of those. Or you could boot it right back up and get some more backstory with the demon princess that Gray cares about. Maybe you get the latest update on their relationship. Mayhaps the flashback will involve that sketchy knight she's swooning over, who looks a lot like Griffith from Berserk. Even the fact that you can just chill here for a while instead of having to dodge cute little monsters who try to eat you. That was a bad example. Look, being able to chill here is nice. Let me wax poetic about it. In Persona 5, okay, you caught me. This video is really just a not-so-clandestine way for me to talk about Persona 5 without ever having to recount in vivid detail how it took me 6 entire years to beat that last game. Shout out to anyone who shudders when they hear the names Okumura or Shido. In Persona 5, you get lots of time to just be a teenager. A little too much time. You get to do all of these seemingly random tasks that help you strengthen your character as an individual, which then prepares you for the game's mind palaces. I'm not talking about that today. What I want you to pay attention to is the bottom right corner of the loading screen, where it tells you to take your time. It serves as a constant reminder that even though your time feels limited, that feeling is an illusion. Really, you're allowed to take however long you need to make a decision.
Okay, we can waste a little bit more time, but God.
Void Stranger embodies this low-stress, high-effort decision-making. This is what makes mechanics like that slip animation so comforting. As you progress further into the void, its puzzles become harder and harder. Finding solutions to all those puzzles has made you pay more attention to your surroundings. After some time, you finally notice that in the bottom left corner of the HUD, the word void appeared and has remained as a sort of brand. It looks like eating the colorless orange that Demon Bat left for you did something after all. However, death, just like time, feels like a mirage. If you fall on a level, you just have to restart it. Falling in a level includes monster collisions. Monster encounters won't feel like standard battles in Void Stranger. Even if you had, say, 999 HP instead of 10, you don't stand a chance trying to fight any of the creatures you see. So ultimately, the only skirmishes you'll have will be similar to trying to achieve a pacifist run in Undertale, taking the non-violent path to victory through negotiation and compromise, which is kind of like demon negotiations in Persona, except those negotiations and compromises will be entirely with yourself. But what if there was another way to resolve conflict? This is where I have to go into detail about a concept that involves spoilers. I unfortunately can't find a compromise with my own inner demons to not discuss this topic, because it's one of the cooler parts of Void Stranger. So if you want to go in blind, skip to this time code here. Okay, looks like they're gone. You will eventually find the Void Sword in this game. And I just want to say, it took me 50 hours to find this thing without looking it up, so I feel a little less guilty sharing this with you. This weapon lets you one-hit monsters just how they're able to one-hit you, allowing for some much-needed relief to the game's tension. But the ownership of this sword comes at a price. When you Excalibur pull the blade from its resting place, you quickly realize that what you pulled it from wasn't stone. No, it was a ginormous tardigrade. How's that for an oxymoron? This normally microscopic critter that can survive voids such as the vacuum of space, or Sam Porter Bridge's stomach lining, wants to make you its snack. And if you want this power up, screw that. If you want to live, you have no other choice but to face this demon. Just as any FromSoftware game can teach you, you'll probably die a lot until you figure out how battle works. And while dying can feel unfair at times, it's actually not. Here's the kicker. Your enemy acts at the same time you do. Like earlier when you pushed that rock and the leech was able to ignore that you just used a turn. You have as much time as you need to make each move. So dying is typically connected to not thinking several steps ahead of your foe. As someone who gushes over JRPG mechanics, fighting this large water bear is the best innovation of turn-based battles that I've seen in years. There's no menu, there are no spells. There's only figuring out how to position your tiles, nimbly navigating your way around charged up hyper beams that won't obliterate you into stardust because there will be nothing left, and struggling toward that satisfying sword slice. What this accomplishes is an adrenaline-filled dance between you and your opponent that juxtaposes waiting to act while still feeling as if you're immersed in the action. Once you've emerged on the opposite end of this conflict, it will only leave you craving more encounters like it, but it will also keep you pondering about what other mysteries that, with enough determination, await your unraveling. You struggle further into the void, taking your time with puzzles that get more complex and enemies that become nastier. And it's here that the game's music becomes your only friend. Void Stranger's tunes will sonically aid the brain tickle you get from solving its sometimes maddening puzzles. If you're ever stuck, the sounds can keep you steadfast. I don't think it's a mistake that the music can make you feel like these Cyclops with hands for bodies are performing near perfectly to the percussion of this level. You know that you're not supposed to like these dudes. Look at their monster portrait. Does that look inviting to you? Yet, here's this crunchy beat in your ears, suggesting that it's okay to love them. For a moment, these guys feel like companions cheering you on as you solve puzzles. Aside from the in-your-face Dark Souls character here, Homegirl looks like a 2D version of Guinevere, all the way from her pose to, well, those. Chronic shoulder pain seems to be a running theme in this game. The music here is inviting you to just hang out. Knowing Abrosky's penchant for musical perfectionism, this is all by design. I don't want to call this dynamic proprietarily Toby Foxian or anything, for reasons that I've already touched on. Just about any game will invite you to hang out in it at some point. Even games that want to kill you. It's more so an appreciation of how Abrosky, Ebo, and Toby can take a medium like the 2D video game and compel you to not play it for a while, soaking up its atmosphere. You should probably go touch some grass for real this time. It occurs to you that the music that's been fueling this drive to push forward despite the seclusion only has so much mileage. You're reminded of the journey that brought you here, that demon princess, and the knight that looks like, well, him. A manga character who once said that he considered no one his friend. Someone with so much ambition that he sacrificed every person who placed their trust in him. You remember the scenes you've experienced, and you begin to recall the catharsis of a story not unfamiliar to your core. The first act of many in a game that feels like there's always one more secret to uncover is an homage to Berserk. Your pendant is the Crimson Bahulet. The demon princess is Charlotte. The way Gray's eye solarizes like lightning. The characters who act like their own god hand, who are led by a being named Void, by the way, which only appear during eclipses, are there as well. The eclipse! When you gaze too long into this abyss gazes back at you. Anyone perking up right now probably knows that just about any FromSoftware game released in the last 15 or so years has varying levels of parallelism to Berserk. But for the purpose of not dragging things out, the journey that you experience mostly alone in Void Stranger is the Black Swordsman arc, while its, at times, genre-bending past represents the Golden Age arc, the story that sets up that eventual tragedy. In the Black Swordsman arc, the main character, Guts, struggles alone. Like your first run in Void Stranger, he's marked with a brand that serves as a haunting reminder of his past mistakes, because it relentlessly brings demons who try to kill him, even to the point of not being able to sleep. This gets even worse, as the brand etched into Guts' neck causes anyone near him to be in the same danger he is. Remember those NPCs that you can't just go up and talk to? Hi, Casca. Where if you make the wrong decision, they get annihilated? That's a cross Guts must carry in the story of Berserk, interpreted into a game mechanic. Not being able to save anyone foisted into danger because of your disposition isn't just tragic. It's a constant reminder that you once lost something that was invaluable to you. Connection. As you arrive at the tail of this serpent, Void Stranger has one last trick up its sleeve. A song that echoes the vocals and sadness of Transistor's The Spine begins to play as you try to reach your unknown destination. Your puzzle Purgatory has turned into something more sinister, and it does it eloquently, as you're trapped in confined areas, mocked by a well-timed meter and monsters that appear as if they're cackling at you for ever trying to get to the bottom of this mystery. You're getting what the game would probably define as the bad ending. It feels symphonically bittersweet, and it prods you to make the supposition: if this is what could possibly go wrong, then for the length of a profoundly cinematic moment, you don't want to be right. The game forces you to start over, saving you a descent into the further madness that comes along with that brand of yours. The brand has now been removed. Remember the locusts that you thought were just collectibles? Those are actually extra lives that you need in order to avoid the brand that leads to the music video ending. You never had a chance to figure this out because you ate that devil fruit before ever collecting one. The puzzles that you once had zero risk in solving when you were voided now carry a heavier burden, because if you run out of your locusts, you will go back to the demon bat. Now unbranded, you see that there are collectible crystals that give purpose to that memories subsection of the pause menu that once confused you. These slight changes have changed your perspective entirely. Hoping to achieve paradise, you are now tasked with finding a way to get to the end of this labyrinth without being voided. Sure, the game's more difficult now, but that last run taught you the skills needed to succeed. And if you can manage to make a connection with others, you don't have to feel like you're doing that alone. My most favorite quote from Berserk, a quote from Guts, ties nicely into everything I've shared about my first journey through the void. Depending on who translated the quote, it can look different, so I'll paraphrase it for you. If you're alone, if it's just your life, you can use it however you please. Alone, my own body on the line, I could rough it out without regard for how worn it got. But with the two of us, my sword grew heavy. I could no longer afford to die, and I could no longer handle it all on my own. I set aside my ways, relied on the strength of others, and somehow, I've pushed on. From two games that were made by two star-crossed developers, to amazing independent developers like Toby Fox, or commercial developers like FromSoftware, who've made an impact on their game design, to the community that their love for making games fostered, such as the System Erasure Discord server. Void Stranger is what you're looking for, what I was looking for. There's this quote that I happened to discover from Ebo, but I know Abroski had to have endorsed it. I'm not going to share it with you, because it's more impactful if you manage to find it yourself. Instead, I'll give my response. Ebo, I can hear you. Despite the technological capability to be more connected with total strangers more than ever, at times, a lot of times really, it feels like I can no longer reach others. I do desperately wish to be heard, to be understood. And the games that you and Abroski created have given my journey through all of this. Putting myself out there and making a YouTube channel, the growing pains and emotional pangs that come with that, attempting to connect with others, and the friends that I made along my journey. It's given all of that meaning. So, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to listen. The goal of making this video was to try and make a challenging script, which could not have happened without relying on others. I always try to give credit where credit is due, so it's my pleasure to give praise to a friend of the channel, the Gamalier. The Gamalier took the time to look over the script for this video and really kept me grounded in trying to keep things on theme. I highly recommend all of his videos, especially this video, which has a great twist that I won't ruin. But also, if you're interested in how screenwriting works and how that relates to video games, this channel does an excellent job of teaching you just that, so I can't recommend it enough. You can find it linked in the description. I'm going to try and take a stab at my first long-form video essay, the one I alluded to before that's currently at 63 pages in its script, while also looking for a job because I've been unemployed for just over a year now and trying to figure out this whole YouTube thing. Unfortunately, as much as I love creating, it's not exactly paying the bills at this moment. So thanks again, and I'll try my hardest to wow your pants off the next time we see each other. Until then, keep an eye out for a Discord server link, and probably a Patreon page with some benefits. But most importantly, take care of yourselves.